You're not fit to be a mother." Then my mother-in-law tried to take my son away. If you've ever been doubted, ever been dismissed by your own family, stay with me. Because this story isn't just about a courtroom. It's about a mother, fighting for her son. And in that moment, I knew. This birthday wasn't just for Ethan. It was a warning shot. Stay with me. Because what she didn't know was, I'd already started fighting back. The tablecloth was still wrinkled from the night before, and the frosting on the cake hadn't set the way I wanted. Ethan didn't care. He was dancing barefoot across the hardwood floor, his dinosaur pajama pants peeking from under his party jeans. But when Victoria stepped through the front door, every ounce of warmth in the room dropped by 10 degrees. She arrived precisely 12 minutes early. Not by accident. Her taupe coat was spotless, her hair locked in its usual helmet of tight silver curls, and her gift was nowhere to be seen. I remember the first time she held Ethan in the hospital. Arms rigid, mouth tight, eyes scanning him like she was assessing for flaws. No cooing, no softness. Just the clinical judgment of a woman who treated bloodlines like pedigrees. Now, 8 years later, she was still cataloging everything. The outdated coffee table, the chipped kitchen tile, the fact that I'd borrowed folding chairs from the neighbor across the street because we didn't have enough of our own. "You didn't do this yourself," she said flatly, nodding toward the balloon arch Ethan and I had taped together the night before. I smiled. "Actually, we did." Her eyes drifted toward the dining room ceiling like she was searching for water damage. Daniel hadn't shown up yet, of course. Work emergency, or traffic, or maybe just the gravitational pull of not wanting to be the buffer between his wife and mother again. Victoria hovered in the kitchen, opening the fridge without asking, then the pantry. "You know, I've always wondered why you didn't ask Daniel's parents for help with the down payment. We would have, if you'd just waited." Waited. For what? For her approval? For a real wedding? For permission? Ethan ran past her then, laughing, holding a party horn in his mouth and dragging a balloon behind him like a puppy. She offered him a pat on the head as if he were a neighbor's child, then turned back to me with that chilly half-smile. "I suppose it's functional," she said, glancing around again. "At least until something better comes along." Something better. Someone better. It was always between the lines with her, coated in compliments and served with almond tea. She didn't raise her voice. She raised your blood pressure. By the time Daniel finally arrived, 26 minutes into the party, Ethan had already blown out his candles. I caught a flicker of guilt on his face when he saw that, but he moved quickly into apology mode. "Sorry, babe. Conference call ran long." I nodded. What else was there to say? He kissed Ethan's forehead, and Victoria immediately pulled him aside. I saw her whisper something into his ear. He didn't respond, just nodded once and picked up a paper plate. The party rolled on. Kids ran in circles. A few parents I barely knew made small talk near the windows. I smiled where I had to, refilled juice boxes, and scraped frosting off paper towels. From across the room, I saw Victoria watching Ethan. She made her move right after the piñata. He was off to the side, fiddling with the toy he'd won. She crouched down, voice syrupy. "Wouldn't it be fun to live in Grandma's big house?" she said, loud enough for me to hear. Ethan looked up at her with a furrowed brow. "Why would I live there? I live with Mom." "Oh, just a silly thought," she said, brushing invisible lint from his shoulder. "Bigger rooms, private yard, real space to grow." I didn't interrupt. I just watched. Every muscle in my body wanted to snap, but I didn't. Not yet. Later, when guests trickled out and the kitchen looked like a confetti war zone, Daniel stepped outside to take out the trash. Or so I thought. I passed the window and saw them on the porch. Victoria's hand on his arm, his eyes down. "You need to think about what's best for Ethan," she was saying. "Rachel's emotional state isn't improving." I froze. My emotional state? She said it like a diagnosis, like I was unstable. like I was something to be handled, not trusted. Daniel didn't argue. He didn't agree either, just stood there, like always, caught between silence and spine. I backed away from the window, heart pounding. I stood behind the curtain, heart pounding. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I was alert. The envelope felt strangely calm, yet it opened a door I never imagined I'd have to walk through. It was sitting on top of yesterday's mail, perched like it knew it didn't belong with pizza coupons and a PTA reminder. My name, Rachel Carter, typed in block letters just below the return address of a law office I didn't recognize. My hand hovered over it longer than it should have. By the time I tore the flap, Ethan had already made a Lego city out of the living room and was halfway into recreating a dinosaur war on the coffee table. The words blurred together at first. Petition for temporary custody. Alleged mental instability. Emergency hearing requested. I didn't breathe for a full 30 seconds. Then I read it again. This wasn't a threat. This was real. I sat down on the kitchen floor, knees cracking on impact, as Ethan ran past me making explosion sounds with his mouth. I gripped the letter tighter. She was doing it. Actually doing it. Taking me to court. For custody. A bitter memory surfaced like bile. Victoria's voice in the hospital hallway, months after Ethan was born. I had been in the throes of postpartum, barely sleeping, barely functioning. I'd overheard her whispering to Daniel, "Some women just weren't built for motherhood." He didn't defend me. He didn't even flinch. Just let her words hang there, absorbing into our lives like mold. Back then, I had chalked it up to hormones, to grief, to the fog of everything. Now I realized she had never let go of that narrative. She'd just been waiting for the right moment to weaponize it. I called Monica Patel an hour later, and she picked up on the second ring. I'd gotten her number from a coworker months ago, just in case, back when I thought Victoria's worst offense was passive-aggressive remarks about my cooking. Monica's voice was steady, all business. "I've handled 2 cases like this in the last year," she said after reading the petition. "We'll fight it, but you need to stay quiet. No rants on social media, no texting Daniel about it. You win in silence, not in panic." Easy for her to say. That afternoon, while Ethan watched cartoons, I sat on my bed and reread every sentence. Victoria claimed I was emotionally volatile and had demonstrated erratic behavior that could be detrimental to Ethan's development. She attached fabricated concerns from an anonymous informant, probably herself in a fake email account. Daniel came home around 6, carrying Thai takeout and his usual invisible armor of detachment. I handed him the letter before he could say anything. He read it, jaw tightening, then said, "I didn't know about this." I waited. He didn't add, "I'm sorry," or "I'll stop her." Just, "Maybe she's just trying to help. You've been stressed lately." I laughed. It came out cracked and bitter. "Are you serious?" "I'm not taking sides, Rachel." "You don't have to. You already have." He didn't stay for dinner. That night, I found out Victoria had listed herself as Ethan's emergency contact at school, without telling me. She'd called the front office and said I was hospitalized for exhaustion, and she was taking over temporarily. The school secretary, thankfully, had flagged it as suspicious and left me a voicemail. I called Emily after that. My hands were shaking. "She's out for blood," I said. "She wants him." "Then give her a war," Emily said flatly. "Don't wait to defend. Go on the offensive. Prove you're the stable one. You don't owe her fear." I didn't sleep. Instead, I dug out the number of my old therapist and made an appointment for the next morning. By Friday, Monica had filed a response. The court date was set for the following Thursday. I still hadn't told Ethan anything. I couldn't. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that someone who claims to love them is trying to erase their mother? That evening, another envelope arrived, this time directly from the court. Inside was a motion Victoria's lawyer had submitted, notifying us that multimedia evidence would be introduced, namely a video clip. I didn't remember any video. What kind of video? When? Where? The idea clawed at me. She had filmed me? Or tricked someone else into doing it? Was it from years ago when I'd cried on the floor during a panic attack? Was it recent? Was it even real? I stared at the printed notice, my vision tunneling. If she's already manipulating what the judge sees, what is she planning for Ethan? I whine, and the silence had no answer. I didn't ask Ethan to testify. I didn't even mention it. But one night, while brushing his teeth, he said, "Can I tell them what I saw?" He was standing on his little step stool in front of the bathroom sink, foam building around his lips, the Spider-Man toothbrush wagging as he spoke. I paused mid-brush myself, staring at him in the mirror. "Tell who what?" I asked, rinsing my mouth. "The judge," he said simply, spitting. "About what Grandma said, and what she did. I want to tell them." I turned off the faucet. My heart thudded once, hard against my ribs. "You don't have to, baby. That's not your job." "But I want to." It wasn't the first time he'd surprised me like that. When he was 6, a classmate had been picked on for wearing hand-me-down shoes. The teacher later told me Ethan had stood between them, arms crossed, and said, "Everyone's shoes walk just the same." He's always known when to speak, but this wasn't school. This was a courtroom, with adults who talked in codes and used words like primary custodian and fitness to parent. And suddenly, I was the one unsure if I was enough. That night, I called Monica. She listened, quiet as always, and then said, "We don't put him on the stand." Not like that. Not unless we're sure it won't backfire. But we can request a guardian ad litem assessment. Neutral, confidential. If he passes their screening, the court might consider it. 2 days later, a woman named Karen Holloway arrived at our door. Warm eyes, gray cardigan, no clipboard. She told Ethan she was there to learn more about his superpower. He laughed and said his power was knowing when people were lying. I sat in the kitchen while they spoke in the living room, the sound of Ethan's voice rising and falling in waves. At one point, he paused and asked, "Do I have to live somewhere else?" The question cracked something inside me. Karen came into the kitchen an hour later. "He's bright, honest, thoughtful, and incredibly attached to you." She hesitated, then added, "He's aware of more than you think, and he wants to be heard." Monica filed the motion that same afternoon. While we waited for the court's response, I met with Dr. Lyndon, my old therapist. He hadn't seen me in over 3 years, but remembered everything. "I'm not falling apart," I told him, "but I think I'm being dismantled by someone who smiles while doing it." He agreed to write a statement, documented my full recovery, cited consistent behavior, emotional stability, and parental responsiveness. Monica said it would help, but warned that Victoria's lawyer might claim I coached Ethan. "Then let him try," I said, "because Ethan doesn't parrot anyone." On Wednesday, we went to a legal prep office, neutral ground for court-appointed interviews. Ethan brought his favorite notebook and wore the dinosaur tie I bought him for his first music recital. I brought nothing except the feeling that the entire day hinged on his answers. Karen met us in the lobby. "Rachel, you'll need to wait out here," she said gently. I nodded and sat on the stiff leather couch outside the door, hands clenched around the strap of my purse. Through the frosted glass, I could only catch muffled tones. "Does your mom ever forget to feed you?" "No." "Do you feel safe at home?" "Yes." "Has anyone ever told you your mom is a bad person?" "Only Grandma." I leaned forward, eyes burning. The seconds dragged like hours. Then I heard Karen ask, "Where do you feel most loved?" There was a pause, just long enough for my heart to stop. "With my mom," Ethan said, soft but clear. "She lets me be me." I bit my lip hard enough to taste metal. There it was. Truth. Not coached, not planted, just pure, from the source. A few minutes later, the door opened. Ethan came out holding his notebook, and Karen gave me a small smile that didn't need translation. The next morning, Monica called. She didn't waste time. The judge will allow his testimony. We go to court on Friday. They say the courtroom is where justice lives. That day it felt more like a stage, and I was the defendant in my mother-in-law's play. The walls of Middlesex Family Court were a bland, bureaucratic beige. The air smelled like photocopied paper and old furniture polish. My heels clicked too loudly against the polished floor as I followed Monica into the hearing room. I had imagined this day 100 different ways. None of them ended with my stomach this twisted, or the sudden urge to vanish before anyone looked at me too long. Victoria was already seated, legs crossed, a soft pink scarf draped just right across her shoulders like she was attending a charity brunch. Her expression was unreadable, but her hands rested neatly on her lap as if she wasn't trying to take someone's child. Daniel sat behind her, chin low, gaze fixed on a spot on the floor. He didn't look at me. He hadn't looked at me in days. Monica leaned toward me as we sat. "Remember?" she whispered. "She won't fight you in anger. She'll smile while sharpening the knife." And sharpen she did. Victoria's lawyer, Tom Brennan, was everything you'd expect from a man who billed by the hour in 10-minute increments. His voice had courtroom theater in its tone, measured, exaggerated, polished for effect. "Your Honor," he began, standing tall before the bench, "we present this short clip not to shame Ms. Carter, but to illustrate concerning behavioral patterns." He hit a remote. On the monitor, an image flickered to life. Me, in our living room. Ethan off camera, wailing. My voice, raised, ragged, shouting something about bedtime and cleaning up toys. It was a moment I had forgotten, like so many exhausted evenings layered over each other. Brennan paused the video at the frame where my face looked most contorted. Ms. Carter appears agitated, her tone aggressive. The child is audibly distressed. I wanted to scream, wanted to explain that this wasn't the whole story, that it was 9:45 p.m., that Ethan had refused to sleep, that I had apologized 5 minutes later, but none of that was in the clip. Judge Wilkins shifted in her seat, neutral but no longer unreadable. Monica stood, voice calm but firm. "Your Honor, we submit the following in response. A signed affidavit and in-person testimony from Dr. Linden, a licensed therapist who worked with Ms. Carter for over a year following a diagnosis of postpartum depression. His statement confirms a full and sustained recovery, with no indication of abusive or unstable behavior." Dr. Linden took the stand briefly, his voice clinical and precise. "Ms. Carter has shown resilience, insight, and responsibility in every session. One moment of frustration, recorded without context, is not a pattern. It's a snapshot." Brennan didn't like that. He launched into a new tactic, putting me on the stand. "Ms. Carter," he began, pacing slowly, "have you ever yelled at your son?" "Yes," I answered, like every parent I know. He smiled like I'd fallen into his trap. "And would you say your emotions sometimes overwhelm you?" No more than anyone trying to raise a child with limited support and a mother-in-law who undermines me at every opportunity. The room went quiet. That wasn't in the script. Monica shot me a look but said nothing. Then came Daniel. He walked to the stand like a man approaching a firing squad. When asked direct questions, he gave the safest answers imaginable. "Would you describe your wife as emotionally stable?" "I believe she loves our son." "Have you ever witnessed an outburst?" "Parenting is hard. We've both had moments." He didn't lie, but he didn't help. And then came Victoria's moment. She stood without being asked. Brennan nodded as if this had been planned. "I just want to say," she said, voice dripping with dignity, "if Ethan had a choice, he wouldn't choose her. He's scared. He told me." I didn't blink. Monica stood immediately. "Objection. Hearsay and speculative." "Sustained," Judge Wilkins said. But the damage was done. It was in the air now. That seed of doubt she specialized in planting. The judge turned toward Monica. "We'll hear from the child directly in a limited session. Final testimony will be considered Friday." Court adjourned. I stood, legs numb, and turned to leave. That's when I saw him, Ethan, waiting by the hallway with a court assistant. His face lit up when our eyes met. Through the glass, he mouthed a single word: tomorrow. He stepped up to the witness chair with his stuffed bear in one hand and the weight of our world in the other. His feet barely touched the floor. The chair had been adjusted as low as it would go, but Ethan still looked small, smaller than I'd ever seen him in a public space. The bear he clutched, a faded yellow thing named Cooper, sat in his lap like an emotional translator. I wasn't allowed to sit next to him. Court protocol dictated that I remain seated to the left, behind my attorney. Monica gave me a quick nod as if to say, let him speak. Trust him. But all I could think about was how quiet the room was. How heavy that quiet felt when a child was about to tell adults who he believed in. Good morning, Ethan, Judge Wilkins said gently. She leaned forward slightly, tone warmer than I'd ever heard it. Hi, Ethan replied. He gave a shy wave. We're just going to ask you a few simple questions, okay? You can say, I don't know if you're not sure. And if you want to take a break, just tell us. He nodded. Okay. Do you know why you're here today? He nodded again, slower this time. To talk about where I live and stuff. Brennan, Victoria's lawyer, smoothed the lapel of his suit and leaned forward. Ethan, can you tell us where you live now? With my mom, Ethan answered. In the house with the red door. And what do you like about your house? He blinked, then smiled. We have a beanbag and a drawer just for snacks. Some of the tension in the room lifted. Even Judge Wilkins smiled at that. Who usually makes your meals? Brennan continued. My mom. She lets me help with eggs, but not the stove yet. Brennan adjusted his tone. And do you ever stay with your grandma? Sometimes. Do you like it there? He shrugged. She has cable. A faint chuckle rippled through the room. What does your grandma say about your mom? Brennan asked suddenly. Monica sat up straighter. Ethan hesitated. Judge Wilkins stepped in. You don't have to answer that, Ethan, unless you want to. He looked down at Cooper for a moment, then lifted his head. She says my mom is weak, that she cries too much, that she's lucky Dad hasn't taken me away yet. Victoria stiffened in her seat. The color drained from her face. Brennan quickly objected. Your Honor, I... Overruled, Judge Wilkins said before he could finish. Ethan wasn't done. She says stuff when she thinks I'm playing or watching TV, but I hear it. The courtroom went still again. And how does that make you feel? Monica asked, her voice softer now. Ethan looked toward me for the first time. His eyes didn't waver. I feel bad. Like maybe I'm not supposed to love my mom, but I do. A lot. He took a breath, the way I'd taught him before spelling tests. She doesn't try to make me someone I'm not. She listens. Even when I mess up, I feel safe with her. There was a pause. Not of silence, but of something heavier. Something honest that no lawyer could cross-examine. Then Ethan turned to the judge. I want to stay with my mom. Not because she's perfect, but because she sees me. Victoria's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Her carefully constructed armor had cracked. Not from a lawyer's argument, but from a child's truth. A truth she hadn't expected to face. Judge Wilkins folded her hands, her gaze steady. Court will reconvene tomorrow for the final ruling. Rachel exhales. For the first time in weeks. The judgment took less than 5 minutes to read, but it rewrote everything. I'd prepared for a battle. My heart had been rehearsing speeches all morning. What I'd say if the judge hesitated, if Victoria smirked, if Daniel spoke up. But in the end, there was no dramatic pause, no debate. Just the soft shuffle of papers, the clearing of a throat, and a verdict that felt like both an ending and a beginning. In the matter of Hartwell versus Carter, the court awards sole legal and physical custody of Ethan Carter to Rachel Carter. Supervised visitation rights only shall be granted to Ms. Victoria Hartwell, contingent on biannual review. Victoria didn't speak. She didn't protest or demand clarification. She simply stared forward, lips pressed tight, like she'd swallowed something sharp and refused to show pain. Daniel was seated 2 rows behind me, his shoulders slumped. For the first time in weeks, he looked at me. Really looked. Judge Wilkins offered a final nod. The gavel didn't slam. It just clicked once, like a door latch sliding home. Outside the courthouse, the sky was pale and cold, but I didn't feel it. There were cameras stationed across the street, local outlets that had picked up on the case after someone leaked filings. Monica touched my elbow as we walked past them. "Keep going. You don't owe them a soundbite." I nodded, shielding Ethan with my body even though no one had asked to photograph him. He clung to my coat, humming something tuneless but calm. We made it to the parking lot without incident. That's when Daniel approached. He looked thinner than usual. Or maybe just smaller. "I didn't protect you," he said, his voice gravel low. "I failed both of you." I didn't answer right away. I watched Ethan buckle himself into the back seat, humming still. "Yes," I said, but Ethan didn't. Daniel's lips parted slightly, like he wanted to argue or apologize again, or undo it all in one sentence. But he didn't say anything else. He stepped back. I closed the car door and didn't look back. That night, Ethan and I didn't talk about court. We didn't mention Victoria or the ruling or what came next. Instead, we dumped out the Lego box in the middle of the living room and built a spaceship. A big one. Messy, uneven, lopsided, and completely ours. Ethan handed me a blue piece. "This is the shield," he said, "so no bad guys can get in." "Perfect," I said, locking it into place. When we finished, he held it up proudly. "This one's ours, Mom. Just ours." We sat there in the golden lamplight, floor covered in plastic bricks and popcorn kernels, surrounded by the kind of peace that doesn't announce itself. It just settles in like it always belonged. Later, I tucked him in. He curled onto his side, Cooper the stuffed bear tucked under one arm, spaceship on the nightstand beside him. I stood there for a moment, watching his chest rise and fall. The same rhythm I'd memorized when he was an infant. The same heartbeat I'd fought to protect without even knowing I was preparing for a war. I leaned down and whispered, "You don't need permission to love. You just need the truth and the guts to defend it." The courtroom didn't explode. It simply ended, with truth finally louder than performance and control slipping from the hands that abused it. Rachel didn't win because she was louder, richer, or more connected. She won because she didn't flinch when injustice dared to rewrite her worth as a mother. Like the last stone in a collapsing wall of lies, Ethan's words made it clear. Love, not power, defines a family. Sometimes justice doesn't shout. It just stands its ground until the storm passes. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share. Because stories like these deserve to echo farther than the courtroom walls.